Thank you once again for joining us for today's webinar. I will quickly, as always, introduce Walkingtree for anyone joining us for the very first time. At Walkingtree Technologies, we are into the 11th year of our existence with our close to 200 strong team based out of India and the US. We develop platform applications for enterprises. We have extensive experience in enabling digital transformation, system integration, migration from legacy to modern to ecosystems, and obviously user experience, user interface, and design. Today's presenter is Raj Shekhar, who is our UX architect. Raj has a total experience of over 22 years in design and possessing multiple certification in the field of UI and UX. He has a great experience in applying UX methodologies and processes and guide his team as per the business needs. Now he will be taking you through quite a few UX methodologies. So without further ado, let's get going. I think we can get started. Just please bear with me for a moment. Uh, Hi Raj, over to you.
Hello, everyone. This is Raj here, and I hope everybody is able to listen to me clearly. Today, our subject is for lean UX and how it is going to be the best or um, the most sustainable process from a UX standpoint for the startups. So as Pranshu already introduced me, I don't have to say anything from my end. And today's agenda is going to be to go through the different UX processes that we already have existing and the advantages and disadvantages between those processes and, brief history of what a lean UX is and how it is going to be effective for the startups. So let's go one after the other. Basically, from a UX standpoint, as of now, there are three major famous processes that are in practice now. So the longest one that we have so far is the classic UX or the traditional UX process, which started when the web usability started way back in 1993, and it has been there for, if I'm not wrong, it would be like 2003. And after 2003 and 2006, that's when the Agile has come into existence, and the UX processes also, bent a little bit to make sure that the UX processes are aligned with the Agile UX. And the latest buzzword these days is the lean UX, and how the lean UX process is gonna be more helpful than this. So let's go with the classic UX process. What we do in a classic UX process is more or less on the same process that we follow in a waterfall method in a typical software development process. So what happens here is, I mean, we define the requirements, we design, and we implement, or we develop the code, and then verify it. So once we think that this is a match with the KPIs that we already have defined, then it will go and support or maintain the software. So to brief in a couple of points, in a classic UX process, the UX team has to be involved right in the beginning of the project, where the business analysis is happening, and from there the major work that the UX team or the UX designers will have is in the initial stages of the project. I'm not saying that it's not going to be there. I mean, it's going to vanish after that. But yes, it will be there, but with a minimal effort. And another phase where it's going to be a little more would be almost at the verifying stage. So that's a classic traditional UX process. And most of the time, the research and the user testing or usability testing in some cases will be done in the initial stages, and the same will be verified at the end of the project as well. So that's a typical classic UX for us. And let's see where we can utilize the classic UX process or the traditional UX processes. This will be more helpful and more useful when you have a fixed bid project, and if you're working on a short term, and also you have a clear idea of what your end product is going to be, and all the requirements are handy before we start developing it. In the sense, we know what the intent is, we know who the users are and what they're needed, and from there we'll go ahead with the rest of the process. The team has a good experience executing similar projects. The requirements are stable and fixed. The team is experienced with the technology. I mean, they has to be very hands-on, and the scope of the project itself is very large, and everybody and the UX team has a very fair idea of what needs to be done within the project, which is absolutely fine. But there are a couple of challenges that the UX designer would face when they're using a classic UX process, which is uh, the reviews will be longer, and there are a lot of sign off that needs to be taken from the stakeholders, and the rework times will be longer as well. And also there is a lot of documentation which is involved in this process, wherein, I mean, we have to do the style guides, we have to do the the markups, the wireframes, everything has to be signed off, and everything for every functional specification, the screen has to be there. So there is a lot of documentation involved in it, right? And visual designs with detailed style guides for development, as I said, wireframes, flows detailing every interaction and styles, usability testing that might have no immediate impact on the design. This is the key, because all the tasks are frozen, or all the tasks are defined right at the beginning of the project itself. Involving and coordinating with usability specialists early during the requirements gathering phase, ensuring confirmation of acceptance by stakeholders. So these are the major challenges, if not all. I mean, we might have faced a couple of them while we are implementing this kind of process in our software development companies. So then comes the Agile UX, right? Agile UX, it's basically adopted from a software development teams. In a sense, the main reason for defining this process is exclusively for the software development. It doesn't come from any other background. So having said that, here what happens is the biggest challenge that the market faced was the UX designers himself, to, if they have to do some research on any of the aspects, the sprints being very small, even if there is like 3 weeks, and if the research is going to take like more than a month or 2 months, that would be a challenge. And that challenge is going to overlap or overwhelm onto a couple of sprints, which is going to slow down the processes as well, right? And also, the UX designer has to be a part of the team, and they have to travel along with the sprints, along with the development and testing people as well. So which is going to be another challenge. But let's dig a little deep into what agile UX is. Agile UX is where in every sprint we're going to define, we're going to design, and we're going to verify, which is absolutely fine. But what happens here is the UX designer has to have a clear idea of what the end product has to be, and any each and every sprint that passes on is going to add on to the previous developed product. And an interesting fact here is nothing from a UX design standpoint is permanent. It is subject to change. In the sense, I mean, even the design or any of the experiences that we give are always susceptible to change in an agile methodology, which is again, it has its own advantages and disadvantages. And let's see where we are going to use this process in our companies. This process is more useful if you have multiple iterations uh, of the product which is getting released uh, in a sequence. In the sense, we are going to deliver as per the sprint planning is, and the UX designer has to have what the fixed outcomes are in a particular sprint. And this would be more useful if the product is going to ship quickly based on the timeline, and you need to have the scope, de-scope, or prioritize features based on the budget, quality, and value through a number of sprints, which means the UX designer has to be flexible enough to work on different prioritizations based on these parameters. And you need to act on customer demands over time. You must ensure your user-friendly products by collaborating with customers during development. Your intent is to achieve customer satisfaction through rapid, continuous delivery of minimum viable experiences. In the sense, I mean, it is rapid, it is continuous, but in each and every phase, we are going to give our experiences in the product release. And let's see what the challenges that the designers are going to face in an agile UX. In an agile UX, usually the UX designers, as I said, I mean, emphasized time and again, the UX designers and the project teams have a proper understanding of their role within an agile team. Allowing the entire team to communicate a common vision for the product is another challenge. And sometimes teams are so focused on executing user stories that they don't look at the things from a broader perspective. This is a bigger challenge for a UX designer, because their thought process and their any of the suggestions or heuristic thought processes may not be carried to the developers or the testing team because of the rapid development. And it's completely development focused than customer focused. And UX designers having too much to do within a 2 week sprint time, and there are a lot of responsibilities as well. And the UX research is going to be absent even in the sprint zero, which means when they start, that's when they are supposed to they are going to go into the phase of research. And another biggest challenge is the UX team has to be once from a typical development standpoint, the development or the testing team wants the UX to be one sprint ahead. And one sprint ahead, we don't know what the requirements are. That's the biggest challenge that the UX guys would face if they are in an agile UX. To brief a little bit about what a agile UX works. Suppose, I mean, if you have to design a van or a car. So in the initial sprint, say, I mean, we have like four wheels. Nobody understands what it is. but in the next sprint, we are going to add a platform to it, right? And the next phase, we are going to add the, chairs or the seats to it. And in the next phase, we're going to build the body and add the engine and stuff. And finally, the car is out. So in this process, the UX designer has to have a clear idea that he is going to create a car and how to approach there in stages. That is going to happen in each and every sprint. And here it's already defined that they are going to create a car right at the beginning of the project itself. And let's see how a lean UX is slightly different from what this is. In a lean UX, you'll build, you'll measure, you'll again ideate, and uh, this cycle will go in loops so that you can come to a end product. In this example, the user, I mean, the UX guy, he wants to create a movable asset, right? When I said asset, I mean it's a commute. So he goes to the customers and says, "Hey, I mean, what is the best method for you to commute?" They would say, "If I have wheels on my feet, that's easy. Fine. So if that is the case, we'll create rollerblades." They created the rollerblades. They'll release into the market. Now again they research, say, I mean, how good is this? And they say, I mean, it's good, I can go in a faster pace, but my legs are paining. Okay, if that is the case, then let's build a cycle. So they'll build a cycle, they'll release it into the market, and again they'll again research whether, I mean, this is how helpful is this, and what could be the areas where they can improvise on it. They take the feedback. Now they added a motor into it. So now that becomes a motor scooter or a motorcycle, which is also fine. Again, they release into the market and they say, if probably the users would say that, I mean, it has a balance issue and it's a little not safe. Fine. Then they come back, they have the motor, there are two wheels, now make it four wheels and make it a, car. So likewise, in every phase, the user is actually defining what he wants, and the developed product is in line with what the customer needs. So having said that, let's go a little deep into the lean UX. What is lean UX? Lean UX can trace its origins back to the lean manufacturing, which is defined by Toyota as a part of its Toyota Product Systems, TPS. So it's the main goal behind lean manufacturing is to eliminate the waste in the production line. So that's when they have these Kanban and the Kaizen models also came into existence because of the TPS model. And with the same model, when they wanted to apply the same principles onto the product development, Eric Rice, he is a guy who, I mean, actually in his the Lean Startup book, he applied these management practices to the business, okay, and started this build, measure, learn, feedback (BML) loop to test business hypothesis by soliciting customer feedback on a minimum viable product. This process enabled startups to quickly validate their ideas in the market. So that's a brief history about how the lean UX has come into the product development. Uh, so I think somebody has a question. Hold on a minute, please. Having issue. Jishnu has a issue in audio. Is everyone having that issue, or only Jishnu has that issue?
Uh, I think it might be a problem with Jishnu's connection because I think everyone else is able to hear.
Then
quickly. So I think it would be a good idea, just know if you log out and log in once again, if that helps. We can continue from here, Raj.
yeah, sorry about that, guys. So here's another comment. Okay, sure, we'll try that. That's awesome. Lean UX uses rapid cycles of build, measure, and lean to iterate on product designs. Lean UX highlights the need of research, testing, and collaboration in a software development process aimed at releasing an MVP. A product with fewer features can be deployed more quickly. Okay, the Lean UX technique is a technique that works where the agile development method is already in use. So that's the key. Its core objective is to focus on obtaining feedback as early as possible so that it can be used to make quick decisions. This is where it has more advantages than the previous methods. I mean, again, I'm not trying to emphasize that the classic or the traditional UX or agile UX are not bad, but from a startup standpoint, lean UX is more inclined towards the minimum wastage and minimum expenditure and giving the product which is in line with the customers. So how is it different from agile UX? As far as lean UX came from startup culture, it doesn't bother with unifying designers and developers. The main goal of lean UX is to ship the product or design as fast as possible. That's the key. That assumes the development of MVP products are designs that are tested and proceeded to the next improvement. So the final design can't be created upfront. It's all about measuring and validating. So simply to put, lean UX is more from a outcome than an output. I mean, if you see the traditional UX process or a agile UX process, all we are doing is an output. Like sprint one, this is the output, or the user research, this is the output, right? But in this one, it's more or less on the outcome. So we learn, we plan, we develop, we send it to the market, and again will plan as per their feedback. So the next phase has the outcome of the first phase will be an input for the next iteration. So that's how lean UX has an edge in its process. So let's see the principles of lean UX. In a traditional model, research is something you do before starting to create the product and to figure out what the product is that you are going to build, which means we are already defined that this is the product that we are going to do. How and why and everything will be done in the research itself before we come to a conclusion that we are building it. But in a lean UX approach, designers are continuously building and gathering metrics about what they build. The best part about lean UX is that this process helps in minimize such risks as business outcome risk and solution risk. With lean UX, you can always stop before doing a bigger mistake and rethink your approach when the expenses are very low. Okay, and this lean UX is also data driven because every time that we are releasing a product, we are going to research, collect the data, analyze the data, and then define our ideas around it. So that's how it. I mean, it is more data driven, and somebody has. I'm sorry, but I could not understand about the main goal of lean UX. Can you please take one example and explain? Okay, that's a good question. Let's go back to the previous example that I have. So I'm taking the same example, Ashok, about the lean UX. How was it? How we as software, the question is request you to please take the customer requirement and explain how we as a software developers do. Okay. So take this as an example. In the initial stage, where we're doing a rollerblades, none of the team has a complete idea of what the end outcome is, right? So what the UX guys does here is they go, I mean, they have a idea, and they will research on, can we design a product in these lines? Okay. And if the answer is yes from the customers, they come back, they design it. And how would they design it? That's where in a lean UX, all the developers, the testing team, the designers, stakeholders, everybody is on the same page, because they have, I mean, all this ideation and everything is all a collective effort. Okay. So if I have to give you another example, I can give you an example of Uber. Uber actually started with a guy who was waiting for a cab in London, and in London you have to call the taxi companies for you to get a cab, and they are going to direct the driver to go and pick you. And it was raining, so he wants a cab, and he ended up waiting for hours. That's when he got a thought that, I mean, why can't I have an mobile app where I can book my own cabs and see where my cab is? That's an ideation, right? And soon after they got the idea, he didn't go and invest on the money for that product and started building the product. What he did was he approached the UX team, and the UX team has done a research whether this product is going to be a business solution, or a solution provider for the users or not. They conducted a research, and everybody said, yeah, that's a good idea. All the users said, I mean, we would love it. So that's a go. Now they know that it, it is going to sell. Now what they have to do? They started with booking the cab. They didn't start straight away in seeing the cab or accepting the driver and the taxi number or the phone number and everything. They simply started with booking a cab, and once it is arrived, they get a message, your cab is here. That's the MVP that they released out. Once they released out, they again went back and researched on how the users are feeling about it, and what are the additional features that they want to get onto the application. And that's when the ideas of, I mean, the customers, they gave a feedback stating that, I mean, oh, if I can see the phone number so that I can communicate with the driver, it would be much easier. They add the phone number, and then they said, I mean, if I can have my driver and see where my driver is stuck or where he is coming, that would be awesome. They add the map, and after that, I mean, if I'm traveling to somewhere, I mean, just for my security purpose, I mean, if I can share my ride to somebody else, yes, that's another feature which has been added. So on and so forth. Every time they released a product out, they're again researching and taking the feedback from the customers and building their the new product around those lines. So lean UX is more customer oriented. So the margin for error in any of the product release is very minimal. Oh, I'm glad that you understood, Ashok. So that's a typical example of a lean UX. So let's go back to our lean UX and principles of UX. Yeah, this is where we came back. Sorry about that, and I'm glad that Ashok was able to understand it. So coming back to our principles, lean methodology is based on constant data gathering and applying analytics to find out about the demand and trends. Because startup culture is famous with its velocity and rapid product shipping while it's still in need. Unfortunately, the life of such products might be also short, or research methods used during the lean UX process might be irrelevant. Nothing wrong in it. It could be irrelevant, but it is better to know that they are not in the right path in the initial stages itself, rather than building the whole product, releasing it and failing. To give you a brief idea about the startups, most of the startups uh, they fail because of the same reason. I mean, statistics say that 70 to 75% of the new startups failed because they thought this is going to be a a viable product in the market, and they started building it, released it, and customers didn't accept it. So that's, I mean, not in the slide, but I mean, this is just my, reading knowledge that I am sharing with you. And now, how is this uh, helpful for startups? As we all know, startups, the major challenge for any of the startups in nowadays is the competitors. Everybody is in the race, and to excel in the race, you have to be quick in releasing the product, right? Again, if we take a agile model, somebody has a question. Slide shown is history of no. Anantaram, we are in lean UX and startups. I think your screen has not refreshed. What steps do we need to follow in lean or agile UX to filter big problems? Yeah, I'll go there, Mohan. Please bear with me for some time. I have that in my slides as well.
And Raj, we'll be addressing the questions at the end of the presentation anyway, so you can carry on.
Yeah, Prancho. I mean, some questions might be on the same slide, so that's why I'm checking it. So yeah, to answer your question, Mohan, we'll address that in the last slides, Mohan. So the startups, as I was saying, the concept here being that a business must ship a product as soon as possible. Sales need to rack up quickly for the project to survive. To do that, knowledge must be gathered and serve as a basis for a set of iterations for the product. The goal is to produce a minimum viable product, MVP, and push it out to the market as rapidly as possible. The process usually involves getting the core product out first to establish if there is a market demand, and then building towards a fully realized version in a series of steps. Lean development models test ideas throughout the development process, focusing on constant measurement and so-called learning loops. BML, build, measure, and learn. That's the key for lean UX. Okay, and lean UX is a collaboration of designers, product managers, developers, quality analysts, so that all the stakeholders are in the same page and in the same expectation. The designer understands the product goals from product manager and form the hypothesis, which is the base to generate ideas. Developers and quality analysts should be informed about the ideas so that they can plan their work accordingly. By following a lean UX, your hypothesis turns into ideas, where building ideas leads to product. Leading the product gives the data you need. Measuring the data gives the ideas again. to better the experience, and product it goes on as lean UX in iterative model and cyclic. Okay, and when can we use lean UX? Okay, when there is a need to build products at startup speed and agility. Okay, and when a team needs to conduct experiments by iteratively creating MVPs whose outcomes result in usable products. And again, as I said earlier, if the product that we are going to build, if we want that to be data driven and user centric, then yes, lean UX is the process for us. If a team wants to get out of deliverables business, and if a team wants to produce less documentation, when choosing the right approach to product success requires a large learning curve. So this is another key important factor where we can go for lean UX. That is, we don't know what the end product is going to be, and we know that there is a large learning curve in the journey. That's when we go for a lean UX, wherein we are going to learn as we develop it, because the user or the end customer is going to feed us with his information. The most team members are co-allocated. Okay, and when an organization already following an agile process, that's when the lean UX process is more helpful. Now, the biggest thing is, what are the challenges as a UX designer that we have? This one, the first point, I wouldn't say a challenge, but I mean it's a a pointer for sure. Continuously staying focused during the iterations. I mean the designer has to be focused all the time throughout the process and throughout the iterations. Creating and tracking multiple prototypes in parallel, and defining project boundaries with the product owner, negotiating releases with the product manager. That's a big time hurdle. Understanding and constantly communicating the vision for the product, choosing the right facilitation and communication techniques for the audience, especially when the team is not co-located, building a custom framework by modifying a process that works for the team. And another biggest challenge is having some team members distributed across geographies. That means if they're geographically located in some other location, that's a challenge if we have to do on a lean UX. So having said that, the main intention of this webinar is how lean UX is more helpful for a startup. That doesn't mean that the other processes that we have are not good, or or lean UX is better than the other ones. That's not the intent. The intent was, depending upon the business model and depending upon the product that we're going to deliver, and the information that we have in handy, based on those parameters, we can choose any process that can be more helpful for designing that product. So that's pretty much it. Now I'm more than happy to take any of the questions. Do we need to follow in lean or agile UX to filter big problems? Okay, Mohan, to answer your question, when I said it is iterative and it goes in loops, in a agile UX process, what we do is, I mean, it's more or less like applying layers on top of a core product. In a sense, say for example, you have sprint one, and you are creating a a base for your product, right? And the UX designers might design something thinking that, I mean, for this product, I mean, for this print, this looks good, absolutely fine, right? And then once that is done, at the end of the sprint, the designers have to go and verify whether what they have done is right for that particular sprint or not. Okay. And if that's not the case, your problems will be identified in that sprint itself. And just like we keep a backlog for the development items in sprints, these problems are the outcome, outcomes of these research or the usability testing that they do in sprint one could be a backlog. Ashok, my opinion for Mohan answer is that it is not the problem is big or small, but it is dynamic requirements or static requirements. Mohan, is that what your question is? No. So am I in the right line or the right path to answer your question? Okay. So in an agile methodology, that's where we identify the problems. Okay, and we are going to address the problems again sprint by sprint. Okay, whereas in a lean UX, the problems will be identified even at the MVP stage. In the sense, when we have something that is delivered and the users say, no, 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 this is not, I mean, this is not what we are, anticipating, and this is not what we can use. That's when we clearly know that we are not in the right path. That's when we have to go back to the, whiteboard and start addressing the problem in a different angle. Also, if you remember, one of the challenges that I said was, creating and tracking multiple prototypes in parallel, right? So these parallel prototypes are actually designed to see if the any one of these prototypes is going to resolve the problem for the customer. So when they said prototypes, it's not that just the look and feel. It's when the prototype has to give a solution for any such problem. So if I say I have three prototypes should have different solutions for the same problem. And that's when we do the A/B testing for these particular prototypes and see which one is intuitive and good enough to resolve the issue that they have, that the customers have. So in both the scenarios, you are addressing the problems, but in Agile, you are going to address the problem in an iterative way. Whereas in a lean UX, you are going to address it right in the beginning. So that's why, especially with the startup companies, the lean UX is more suggestible because the wastage of effort and time and money will be minimized because the customer is going to define which way we have to go. Does it answer your question, Mohan? So he has a few more questions, I believe. Please bear with me, guys. If client, I think he's typing.
Raj, we have some questions posted in Q&A as well.
I'm trying to open it, Pranshu. For some reason, it's not opening up.
Okay, I'll probably I'll read it out to you. We have a question from an anonymous attendee. The question is, how is Agile in SDLC different from Agile in UX?
Agile in SDLC and Agile in UX are not at all different. The only difference is instead of having a, stakeholder, the development team, and a, testing team, you also will have a UX team as part of the agile team itself. That's the only difference.
We have another from Mohan. I think he had asked at 9:30. What steps do we need to follow in lean or agile UX to filter big problems?
Yeah, I mean he posted the same in the chat,
Oh, okay, right, right. Yes, of course.
so which I answered. So I mean Mohan has another typical question that anybody
Glad
would
to hear
ask
it.
in a software field. What if the client is irritated, right, Mohan? That challenge is always there, and that's where our negotiation skills will help us. And again, from a UX designer standpoint, this is where we are going to triage, our suggestions in what is a good to have and what is a must. So when we are talking with the product owner or the stakeholders or the client, right? That's when we say, I mean, these are good to have and these are must. And they might say, no, for this I don't have the budget, or I don't have the time, or I don't have XYZ. That's when we say, okay, I mean, if this is a case, why don't we go for a lower version of it, wherein the the users are at least comfortable in using the product. So that's what I meant when I said triage between the client, the stakeholders, and the UX uh, designers. Let's not forget that UX designers or the UX guys are the only voice of the users in the whole application. So we have to negotiate and triage, or communicate, or convince the client or the stakeholders depending on the intensity of effect that it is going to have on the users. Clear, Mohan?
Okay, I can see Vibhash has raised his hand. Vibhash, if you could use the chat or the Q&A box to leave your question. I can see that you have put in something. Fine, guys. I seen a lot of questions coming in from Mohan. If anyone else has questions, please use the chat or the Q&A box.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't post any question. He said, okay, I'll try.
Fine. So I guess that's all we have for you today. Thank you once again, Raj Shekhar, for this lovely session, and thank you for answering all the questions. I think we have something coming up.
Pranshu, thanks for giving that opportunity. And thank you all for participating in the uh, webinar, and so that I can share my knowledge. It's a
Right.
pleasure with you guys.
We'll have a brief break for Christmas and New Year's, and we'll be back in Jan. We have very special webinars coming on React and Flutter. So I'll be sending you out invites. Please do join them, and you can actually share these invites with your friends and colleagues who might be interested in joining these sessions. Thank you, everyone, and good night.
Good night, all. Have a nice night and a weekend.